How do you inspire change in a system that is largely resistant to innovation? It's a question that I'm thinking about at the moment as we are looking at systemic change, meaning system-wide change in a education system. And I was just recently listening to what Simon Sinek's Start With Why podcast, and he was discussing the law of diffusion. And if you're not too familiar with that, that's basically, it's like a bell curve of adoption. So at the one end, you've got your early adopters and innovators, and at the other end, you've got your resistors, and then in the middle, you've got majority of your people. Ultimately, why is in a system, why are people resistant to change? Well, it's because the status quo is getting challenged, and largely because what's worked in the past will work now. But when we're looking at innovation and adoption of new practices, people need to have a real strong reason why we need to change, especially when they're time poor, they've got limited resources and limited sort of skill set to actually really dive in and not waste their time. Because when somebody comes in and says, hey, look, we're going to do this thing, you're not going to get any more time, you're not going to get paid anymore, you're just going to have to do more work, you're going to get resistance. People aren't going to say yes, oh, sign me up. And what he talked about was your percentages of your focus. So where do you focus? If you're trying to invoke change, so for example, at the moment, AI is super heavy, and that is a big thing that's coming in and change in our systems. So where do we put our focus? Well, you've got your innovators, which are usually your 2-3% right at the top. They're, if you put it in big terms, they're like your Elon Musk, your Steve Jobs. Then you've got your early adopters, which are around 10 to 15%. They're the people who just jump on and just try it out, test it out. You've got your majority of your people in the middle. They need a bit of certainty. They need a bit of promise that what they're about to do is worth their while. They want to know exactly how it's going to work, what's going to be the result. And they're looking at those early adopters and innovators to see, is it actually worth their time? And then you've got your last sort of 15-ish%, and they're your resistors. They're the people you don't focus your energy on, because all you're going to do is fight. You're going to butt heads on everything. The only reason they will change is because they have got no more options, and they are getting forced to change. Otherwise, something bad or something out of their control will actually happen. So when we're looking at making change in a system, I want to tell a little story real quick that what I've done in my past. Now, a few years ago, I was tasked with digitizing the entire school system for our context. We were old school. The school was old. It had nearly 70 staff. And a lot of that was PowerPoint. A lot of that was just worksheets, that kind of old style of teaching, which again, status quo, it worked and it still works. However, there was a time for sustainable innovation where we shift from this never-ending hamster wheel of like, let's create resources and print them out and then they're going to bin and all the rest of it, to we need to embrace these technologies that actually can get us sustainable, so we can just duplicate and roll on each year and we're not having to reinvent the wheel every single time. So how do I do it? Well, first, I actually innovated it myself. I started creating all these programs through sites, classroom, all these learning management systems. Now, it was less about the technology, but more about the reason of why I was doing the thing. For me, it was about creating sustainability. I was in my early sort of career in teaching, and I was finding this is not sustainable. If I'm having to run this old race, I'm going to burn out, because the workload for differentiation, the workload for behavior management is just way too much beyond just, sit down, shut up, listen and write this, because it didn't work. It didn't work in the context of the school that I was in, which was a Western Sydney school. So first I started innovating myself, going into what's working, what can I try? And I found a system that worked. And then you need to focus on your early adopters. So I basically built a team, but those team was an opt-in. I wasn't forcing everyone to do it. It was opt-in. And ultimately I had about 18 people. It grew from about 15 up to about 18. And those people, I didn't really have to do much. I just gave them a bit of training, and this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm doing it. And then it went wildfire. Basically, we went across the board, and then everyone was starting to do these same practices, because those early adopters went in and they actually started convincing everyone else, hey, look, this is amazing. We need to be doing this. Why are we not doing this? And I'll tell you another story on the opposite side of this. So I was right into drones and videography and things like that. So I was running this little program after school that was teaching students how to do videography and drone flying and bottle rockets and all this cool stuff. And one of my principals had a great idea. The entire school needs to teach students how to do videography. And the problem with this is we didn't focus on the early adopters, and we didn't sort of have opt-in. It was mandated. So I came to a staff meeting. I was told, you need to go to the staff meeting. You need to present. They're expected to do this. They need to create a video assessment where students create videos. They need to, teach them video editing, use how to use camera. And we're going to buy 100 little portable cameras. It was a disaster. I walked in there and I got absolutely destroyed because I was in my first few years of teaching and leading. And ultimately I went in there and challenged the status quo for those 70 staff, and it just got ripped apart and never got off the ground, and never should it, because that was something that wasn't saving people time, wasn't necessarily adoptable for everyone because it wasn't aligned to their passions or their interests. And ultimately we just found that there was different kinds of success, because if we focused on that middle to bottom first, we're not going to get mass adoption. Whereas if we focus on the high achievers, that's how we do it. And ultimately, that's how we make change in a environment that is resistant to innovation. So, bit of a lesson from Simon Sinek, Start With Why. If you haven't heard him as an author, he's fantastic. He got a book literally called Start With Why. Check him out. But I'm going to leave it there. Remember, effort equals results. I'll see you in the next one.